Hi there, my name's Liv, and today we're looking at something that completely changed how I think about nutrition during pregnancy, and that would be the fact that food that you eat during pregnancy doesn't just grow the baby as it's in the womb, it actually has a major influence on protecting them from or increasing their risk of certain diseases in adulthood. And the science behind this is really eye-opening, and it's known as fetal origins of disease, or fetal programming, or Barker theory, or Barker hypothesis. So let's look at this list here. It includes heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and these aren't just things that people get as they get older. There's actually huge studies that show that they can be traced back to the womb, the time in the womb, and the nutrition that a baby gets or doesn't get during those 9 months cause permanent flips or switches in the metabolism, in blood vessels, and even the brain. And that's the entire point of fetal programming. Um, there's giant UK studies, and we're talking like tens of thousands of people tracked from birth in the 1920s and 30s all the way until they were old men and women. And something really crazy was found during this study, and that was the smaller that you were at birth, the higher your chances of developing heart disease or becoming diabetic was. And it wasn't just a little bit higher, it was 2 to 7 times higher for heart disease, and the diabetes risks are just as bad as well. And no, it's not because they grew up and smoked more cigarettes or ate worse when they were children and adults. They controlled for all of that. And the single strongest predictor was how many pounds that they weighed at birth. That's the Barker data in a nutshell. Birth weight isn't just a number on a chart, it's one of the biggest clues for your long term health and how healthy you're going to be as an adult. And one thing I want to address right here is any baby under 5 pounds 8 ounces is officially considered low birth weight. But the crazy part about the Barker study, the UK studies, was that even babies born at 6 pounds, 6.5 pounds, or 7 pounds, which would be considered a normal birth weight, according to the chart that doctors use, they still end up with way higher risks of heart disease and diabetes as adults compared to babies who were born at 8.5 to 9+ pounds. So every single pound lighter at birth shows up as a higher risk decades later. And that's not an opinion, that is thousands of people tracked from the 1920s until their adulthood. So imagine that there's a baby in the womb of a mother who is starving, and so that baby's body is reacting as if mom uh, is starving, and so food is scarce outside of the womb, and so that baby's body will rewire itself to hoard every calorie. It's super useful, and this is a like very smart strategy of the human body because it would keep that baby alive when there's a famine or food is actually scarce. But this is an absolute disaster in our current world where we have, drive-throughs and food is available everywhere. And then that baby is going to grow up insulin resistant and gain weight way too easily. And that's exactly what happens with poor nutrition in pregnancy. That is known as the thrifty gene trap. So even if the mom is not starving, but she might be eating a diet that lacks actual nutrition, that's going to have the same effect as if she actually is starving. So that's going to train that baby's body to hold on to calories, and it's going to slow down their metabolism for life. So epigenetics is the cool part. So mom's diet adds chemical tags to the body's DNA, and it's like putting sticky notes that say turn this gene off or turn this gene on, and those sticky notes usually stay there for life. And um, sometimes they get copied into the grandchildren too. It's the same DNA but completely different health outcomes based on what mom ate, if that makes sense. And like I said, this can get passed on through generations. Okay, so here is a real world example, and we're gonna thank dentist Weston A. Price for this. So, Weston A. Price, he was a dentist who traveled around the world in the 1930s, and he studied primitive tribes that were eating their traditional diets, which included meats, fish, raw dairy, and these children had wide faces, perfect straight teeth, and almost no cavities. And then one generation later, after switching to white flour, sugar, and junk food, those children had narrow palates, they had crowded, crooked teeth, and they had lots of cavities. So they had the same genes as their parents, but completely different outcomes physically. And also, they had reduced immunity to disease. So, and you can see here on the left, these children who were, their mothers ate a traditional diet while they were pregnant. And all of their children were born with these big, beautiful teeth, smiles, and no cavities. And of course, they wouldn't be suffering from things like sleep apnea or high blood pressure as a result of sleep apnea. And then on the right here, you can see the decay in the teeth here and the narrow palates and the crowding. And if you look around today, you can see a lot of children who are suffering with these really narrow, underdeveloped faces and jaws that are too narrow. Their airways are too narrow, so they become chronic mouth breathers. And this leads to a cascade of horrible health outcomes. Here's an extreme example of the Barker hypothesis, which would be fetal alcohol syndrome. And everybody can accept that drinking alcohol during pregnancy damages the baby permanently into adulthood. So it results in weird facial features, a smaller brain, and learning problems forever. And that is fetal programming on steroids. But junk food and nutrient deficiencies do the exact same thing, just not as intense, just a little bit slower and quieter. Okay, so here is the real historical proof. So during World War II in 1945 to 1944 to 1945 here, Nazis blockaded Holland and people starved because food couldn't get through. And women who were pregnant during this famine, the Dutch famine, had babies who later became obese and diabetic adults. And their grandkids who never saw the famine still show metabolic problems today. So we had one bad pregnancy which resulted in three generations affected. So that's why it's so important to take your pregnancy super seriously and take your nutrition super seriously. Okay, so what actually moves the needle is going to be real food during pregnancy, and we're going to want to especially focus on protein and especially animal protein during pregnancy. We also want to focus on healthy fats from things like eggs, butter, fish, avocado, but we don't want to get too much fish because there is mercury in all fish. And so we don't want to be eating fish like every day, maybe once a week. Um, and then we also, of course, want um, all the important vitamins and minerals that help build your baby from things like fruits and vegetables, herbal teas, mineral rich drinks, and it's going to be very, very important to avoid seed oils and processed junk foods while you're pregnant. You want to really think about things such in a way that you want to think, what would my great grandma recognize as actual food? Because she's not going to recognize junk food that didn't exist when she was a child. So, in conclusion, your plate right now is your baby's lifelong health insurance policy. So, feed your baby like her entire future depends on it because science says it literally does. And so, yeah, thank you so much for watching.